Good afternoon, and welcome to Expose Yourself to Art, a program that looks at the creative process by inviting artists to join us in a chat about their art and their life. My name is David Schrader, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Linda Scheller. Are you there, Linda? There you are. Hi. Hi. Sorry I missed last week.
Yeah, it was marvelous.
Oh, sorry I missed it. Yeah.
Tina
So
Arnold.
anyway, before we went on the air today, we were talking with our guest and you about the different careers that people have had. And that's always been a major concern of mine. I believe I mentioned to you, I said, you are a talented published poet.
Thank you.
But is that how you made your living?
Well, actually, no, much to everyone's surprise.
Yeah.
I made my living as an elementary school teacher, which I thoroughly enjoyed, but it's only now when I'm retired that I really have the time to devote to writing and publication. So, yeah.
Was that ever a concern for you that, I mean, you had this passion, and did it feel like taking a side road or something in your life to, I mean, even though you enjoyed the teaching?
Well, I mean, I was so invested in teaching. It was so important and I loved it. So I didn't have a lot of time to think about, I guess, what else I might be doing because it felt so right and so crucially important. So, and then motherhood came along and boy, I was busy then.
Well, of course.
But there were times when I felt like all these poems inside of me were just shriveling up and blowing away. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big concern for me. When I was very young, I thought that when I grew up, I would be an artist. And then reality set in, had to make a living. I didn't want to be a starving artist, and fulfill that. And so I've always struggled with, who am I? What's my identity? Am I an artist or am I a psychologist or obviously both? But, and at one point, it kind of came to a head because someone mentioned to me, they said, "Oh, you're an artist." And I was taken aback. I just said, "No, I'm not. I do not make my living as an artist." And the person, schooled me in that we live in a capitalistic society where your worth is determined by whether you make any money doing what you do. And since I was not making money as an artist, I felt, oh my gosh, I'm a failed artist. If I were really good, I could, support myself doing this. And I think that's a major concern for a lot of people that I've met. For example, very quickly, I once met an opera singer who was working for a major opera company, but he was also teaching on the side because he had to support his family and make a living. And what was interesting about that is he said, "Don't tell anyone that I'm a teacher." Because if people hear that I have to teach to make a living, they won't believe that I'm an adequate opera singer. So, I mean, that's why this question kind of came up. And we're going to get into it a little more today because our guest today, Sue Siefkin, seems to be, well, I guess we could call her a Renaissance woman. She changed careers like every 10 years. So I don't know, it'd be interesting to ask her about some of this. But before we get there, we need to inform our audience about what's going on around town. It's becoming more important. When we started the show, we were in the middle of COVID and not much was going on. Now everything's opening up. They're opening up with restrictions, but they are opening up. And I understand you've seen this show. You want to tell us about it?
Oh, it is hilarious. It's an adaptation of a classic German farce, and the adaptation is written by Steve Martin, who is also the author of Picasso at the Le Pont Agile. And it's described as an exquisite adaptation. And it is hilarious. It's beautifully directed. The acting is just phenomenal. So Louise and Theo's bourgeois existence is shattered when Louise's wardrobe malfunction becomes the talk of the town. What follows is a fast and furious romp that skewers gender roles, double standards, fleeting moments of fame, and scandal mongering. Fresh, funny, and naughty in all the right ways. And it was sold out, so they've added 2 extra shows, so you can still go Saturday night or to the Sunday matinee. But hurry, because I'm sure tickets are going fast.
And you would give it 4 stars.
Oh, yes. All thumbs up. Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. So next up is, well, this is a little bit ahead of time, the Magic Flute. This is now in production at Opera Modesto, and you can see the stars that you will see if you go to this. It's going to be on October 15th and 17th. Prior to, I always get involved in these because they've been using me as their still photographer. So I get to go a couple days ahead of time and take pictures that then they use in their publicity. So we'll probably be mentioning this again. So the Magic Flute, October 15th and 17th. And next up, what do we have?
So at the Carnegie Arts Center in Turlock from September 18th through January 2nd, Making Your Mark presents a rich array of works on paper, exploring the various methods and materials used in modern artistic practice, showcasing 50 superb prints and drawings. We sample the breadth and beauty of the Hechinger collection, which has the unique theme of hand tools and hardware. Focusing on the creative process, the works represent some of the varied media and tools at an artist's disposal. Making Your Mark celebration of the visual and conceptual aspects of drawing and printmaking educates and inspires in the best way. And just a few of the influential artists of the 20th century that will be in this exhibition include Walker Evans and Wayne Thiebaud and a host of others. So make sure you get to the Carnegie Art Center before this show closes on January 2nd.
Yeah. And at the Carnegie, they have the main gallery, and then they also have the lobby galleries. And in the lobby, from August 11th to October 3rd, I guess it will be closing very soon, is Yosemite Renaissance 36. The Yosemite Renaissance was founded in 1984 by the Yosemite Art Guild, a consortium of local Yosemite landscape artists. Their mission, to motivate artists to develop diverse interpretations of Yosemite and its varied landscapes. Since then, more than 4,600 artists have participated in Yosemite Renaissance programs. So get there before it closes. Ends October 3rd.
Right up. And at the Gallows Center for the Arts, October 1st, there's Henry Cho, a clean comedian. October 2nd, an evening with J.D. Souther, Hall of Fame songwriter. October 3rd, Gabriel Iglesias, comedian. And October 5th, Clint Black, the country singer and songwriter.
And this is another show that's coming up. You can see the pictures, has pirates. It's actually a 2-piece ballet created by Renee Davelier at Central West Ballet, and it's called Pirates, Cowboys, and Damsels. And it'll be on October 22nd and October 23rd. And October 29th at the Grand in Tracy. So I'm really looking forward to this. It sounds like a fun opera. Cowboys, pirates, and damsels. Okay, what do we have up here next? Oh,
So at the Chartreuse Muse Art Gallery from September 2nd through, excuse me. I'm sorry. So the second Saturday Kids Workshop is October 9th from 10 to 12 noon. And this kids workshop is going to happen at the same time as an adult workshop. So you can drop the kids off, make art in one room, and head to another and have some creative me time. And more details can be found at the Chartreuse Muse website. And so check it out, Chartreuse Muse.
okay, and continuing at the Mifflin Gallery is their 5th annual Autumn Art Festival. This will continue until about October 10th, and it'll be followed by the complimentary Healing Arts show. This is it's a show I always look forward to. With my background a little bit in art therapy, this is a Memorial Hospital program run by Galen Martin. And these are all people who use art to work out their problems. And the show every year is wonderful. So I'm really looking forward to it. So right now, go to the Autumn Art Festival, which features some of the best artists that Mifflin has as members. And a couple days later, move on to the Healing Arts exhibit. Anyway, let's get on with, bring our guest in here. So as a way of introducing, as I mentioned before, about she had a number of different careers. I'll just read some of these things. It's very interesting. So for her education, she got a BA at UC Santa Barbara with a year abroad at the University of Bordeaux, France. She got her MA from Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Then she got a JD degree from Humphreys College School of Law in Stockton. And all of this was combined with her works history, which she says every decade she changed. She was a college teacher at MJC and a visiting lecturer at CSUS. She was a Modesto City Council member from 1975 to 1983. Then she went back to school again, became an attorney in 1983 and practiced till 1995. And then was a judge from 1995 to 2015 when she retired. Now, overlapping all of that, she is a textile artist. Again, something very unique, and I look forward to hearing all about it. So let's bring in Sue Siefkin.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
That is really an impressive biography.
Thank you.
It really is. So where should we start? Tell us about these. Where do we start? Tell us about when you became, you said you started sewing when you were young.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned from my mom when I was about 8 years old. She had a little Singer featherweight sewing machine, and she taught me to sew. And one of my best friends also sewed, so we would get together and dress our dolls, and I've been sewing ever since.
Okay. But as we were saying before we started, that did not become your go-to career for getting through life. That took you in other directions.
Yes, it did. I didn't really start becoming an avid textile artist until about 1989, 1990. So it was some years later.
What was the impetus at that point for becoming more serious about textile arts?
Well, I had been sewing, making my own clothes primarily, and sewing for things around the house as a young married woman. But when I became an attorney, I really didn't have time to sew any longer. I didn't have time to do much of anything. I was raising young children.
Mm.
And so I set all of that aside and was working very hard as an attorney, and eventually figured out that I needed the creative part of my life back. And so that's when I signed up for a quilt class for the first time at one of the local quilt shops here in Modesto. And I had always wanted to make a quilt, but just never felt like I had the time to do it. But I made the time and really discovered that that was a piece that was missing from my life, getting
Hmm.
back to artistic endeavors. So that's how that started.
So, did any of these artistic yearnings show up in any of your other careers?
No,
You-
different side of the brain
oh, okay. So
altogether.
when you were teaching, what'd you say, political science,
Right.
you weren't knitting or sewing or anything like
I
this.
probably made the suit that I was wearing, but that was it.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, just before we jump into the art totally, what created these transitions? You were
Well,
a
in some
college teacher?
cases, it was political changes. For example, I'd been a college teacher, and then you may remember that Proposition 13 passed and had a
Yes.
huge impact on the schools. And at that point, they wouldn't tell you whether you had a teaching job until about 3 or 4 days before the semester started. And I wasn't willing to put up with that. So that's when I decided I would go to law school. Becoming a judge is just kind of serendipity. I applied to become a judge, but it takes several years to go through the process. And when I received the appointment by the governor, then that transition occurred.
Okay. And as a judge, were you in any special court or?
I was in just about all of them, everything
them?
except probate.
Yeah.
We moved from assignment to assignment every 3 years or so.
Uh-huh.
So I did a lot of criminal law, a lot of civil law, a lot of juvenile. I did about 6 years in the juvenile court. So it was pretty broad, actually.
Uh-huh. Well, you mentioned, that these different careers were on a different side of your brain. Has there been any oozing back and forth? Do you see anything from your past life in political science and the legal profession showing up in your art? Or
I did make one quilt with a political theme, but
yeah?
that's about the only time.
Okay.
One and only. Otherwise, it comes from a completely different place.
Okay. I mean, it's a reasonable question because most artists, get their urge to create what they're creating from what's going on in their life, and that's why I was asking. So there was this whole other part of you, the creative part, yearning to be free.
Right.
And
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. So take us through some of these. We could look at some of your quilts, and you could kind of explain the process because
I'd be happy to show you.
Yeah, they don't look exactly like my grandmother's quilts.
Well, no, they don't. I started out as a traditional quilter, however. When I first took my first quilting class, that's what I learned how to do, was to cut up bits of fabric and sew it back together again. But eventually I reached the point where I wanted to do my own work, come up with my own ideas. And I like to do pictorial works, which this one is. I often draw on photographs that I've taken in my travels that intrigue me. Sometimes it's just right out of my imagination. So the one that you're seeing now is called 3 Blue Herons. And this was done as a commission for the Lucille Packard Children's Hospital over at Stanford. They were building a new neonatal intensive care unit, and they needed artwork. And so I had done some earlier commission work, and I got a phone call asking if I would submit my portfolio and do some pieces for them. And I wound up doing 2 pieces for that hospital. So because it was in the neonatal intensive care unit, they asked that it be something serene that would be calming to families who have babies in that unit, but not to include any babies in my artwork
Hmm.
because that might be triggering for families. So this is the design that I came up with. I came up with this, did a drawing and submitted it, and they accepted
Uh-huh.
this one.
Oh, it's gorgeous. To what extent is the sewing done by hand and machine?
I'm doing almost exclusively by machine. This is a piece that is what we call a fused piece. So I apply an adhesive to the backside of my fabrics. It's a very thin web of
Mhm.
adhesive, and when you heat it with an iron, then the pieces adhere to one another. So this is applique done by raw edge fusing. These are all raw edges of pieces of fabric that have been cut out. And then I stitch intensely with my sewing machine over the top to hold all the pieces together. So this is the detail.
Wow.
This
That's
is about 40
Mhm.
inches by 30 inches, or 30 by 40, I should say. 30 high, 40 wide.
So
so gorgeous.
can you explain a little bit more about the process? I mean, this is, very pictorial. Um,
Right. What I do is
yeah.
in this one, I did not have a photograph, so I just sort of dreamed this one up out of my imagination. And I did a drawing of it, a small drawing, uh, copy paper size drawing, and then took it to Dittos and had Dittos blow it up to as close to 30 by 40 as they could get it. And then from that, I make pattern pieces, um, and then cut out my fabric pieces, audition my fabrics, and then cut out the fabric pieces that have the adhesive applied to the backside, and then
Uh-huh.
iron them down.
Mhm.
Wow.
You must have a vast collection of fabrics.
Oh, I do. The one who has the most fabric when they die wins.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I saw in another part of your biography that sometimes you dye the fabric to get the colors you want.
I have
Did
done
that
a
happen
lot of
in
that.
this one? Yeah.
Um, there are some hand dyed fabrics in this. I think the sky is a painted sky. So I use
Hmm.
acrylic paint formulated for fabric and paint plain white cotton and then use that in the piece. The mountains are also hand dyed silk in the hills in the background.
Okay.
So beautiful.
Yeah. So would it be correct to say you're an artist? I mean, a painter as well, or have you ever taken your art in that direction through
Actually,
painting or drawing?
during
Yeah.
COVID, for the first time, I tried painting. I'm in an art critique group that Chela Gonzalez leads,
Uh-huh.
and there are about 6 or 8 of us that meet every month, and they're all painters. I'm the only textile artist, so I've been steeped in the painter's craft, watching them and enjoying the work that they do. So when COVID hit, I hit kind of a dead spot. I just couldn't
Mhm.
come up with a quilt that I wanted to make. So I decided to learn how to paint. And YouTube, of course, is a fabulous resource for that.
Hmm.
So I took lots and lots of painting classes, observed painting classes online, and then did some of that. And then ultimately, I actually made a quilt from one of my paintings, which you will see later.
Mm.
Oh,
But that's really the only painting that I've done. But it was a great process to start with the painting and then make the quilt.
uh-huh. So you said originally you did the more traditional quilting.
Right.
What was that transition like from that style to this style? Or you're
Well,
a
one of
fabric
the things
artist.
that I did was attend uh, week-long seminars, and one in particular was very instrumental. It was over at um, Selamar, the Empty Spools seminars, it's called, and it was a 5-day long program with one teacher each time that you go. And so one year I went and I took a traditional class which was fine. But I walked around to all the other classes that were going on at the same time and realized that quilting was much more than the patchwork that I had been doing. And I saw art quilts in numbers for the first time. So from that, the following year, I signed up for an art quilt class with Joan Colvin, who was a fine quilt artist from Washington State. And that was really the beginning for me. And then I've never looked back. I don't think I've made a traditional quilt since then.
Well,
Had you
I've been,
attended a lot of quilt exhibitions before, as you were coming up to this point in your life?
Yes, I started early on entering exhibitions, both quilts and art exhibitions as well. At the Mislin, I entered the showcase annual events and had some of my pieces accepted for those. I also showed over in Santa Clara, at Houston. In Houston, Texas is a big show, down in Long Beach and in Ontario. So yes, exhibiting my work has been a big part of it. It's very important, I think, to do that because you need to see your work alongside other artists' works. You really get to appraise it differently when you see them side by side. So this is one of those exhibited works. This one is traveling right now. This is called Blue Reverie in Peril. And it was created for a show that's now just finishing up over at the Museum of Natural History in Pacific Grove and is on his way to Hawaii, where it's going to be in a continuing show there. So it's in a traveling exhibition. This piece, the center panel is silk, and that is a painted panel of silk that I did using my acrylic paints. And it's a surface design technique. And then the rest of it is cotton. And it's basically just the three fabrics that you see there. This one is about 41 inches high by 31 inches wide.
So where did the idea come from for this? It's very abstract. Again, it's not something you usually see or think about in terms of quilting. I mean, at least from my standpoint. From yours, I'm sure you see all of this, but
quilt artists work both in abstracts and in pictorial work, or combinations of the two. And this one is, you're right, is an abstract piece. Shifting Tides is an exhibit that's supposed to celebrate the entire Pacific region. So artists from Hawaii, Alaska, Canada, British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, and California were invited to submit work for this.
That's beautiful.
And this is in a traveling exhibit, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Going to, I don't know, 7 or 8 different venues.
Oh, just curious, out of curiosity, who sets this up? How did they get set up? Do you submit to some group or something, or?
Studio Art Quilts Associates is the sponsoring organization. It's an organization I belong to that was actually started by Yvonne Porcella, who is a Modesto woman, the late Yvonne Porcella. Now has members worldwide. And the purpose of the organization is to encourage art quilting to be recognized as fine art. So we have exhibits that are sponsored by SAQUA all over the world. But we have a very active group in Northern California. And our Northern California group got together with the groups in Hawaii and Alaska and the other coastal states and put this exhibit together.
Wow.
I'm so glad that quilting and textile arts are being more seriously surveyed and exhibited these days. It's more than time.
We're getting there. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, they're impressive. Ooh.
So this is afternoon in Carpenteria late afternoon. And this is from a photograph that I took. My husband and I were having, I forget, I think it was dinner at a restaurant outdoor patio in Carpenteria. And I love the light on the trees in this patio. So I got a picture of it with my camera and then modified it considerably, and then created the pattern pieces and made this quilt.
So it's
So
easy to see the patterns in the leaves and the trunks of the tree. What about the shading? Is that painted on or is that other fabric?
it is fabric and it is shaded using paint. Yes, I use Sukineko inks to do the shading on the cool side of the trees.
Uh-huh. Okay. But is that a different fabric than the trunks themselves, or is it the same fabric?
Same fabric.
Same fabric.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
I
good
may
to
have
know.
used a little nylon tulle on there too. I can't remember,
Okay.
for the shading purposes.
Okay. Yeah. Just lots of questions because it's a very unique art form. We don't see a lot of, and it's very
Right.
impressive. So,
Right. Thank
okay,
you.
let's move on. I didn't mean to.
So this is a new piece. This one is called Cavalcade, and it's opening today at Bold Expressions in Carmichael. The Sacramento Fine Arts Center has an exhibit every year called Bold Expressions. So this piece and one other were accepted for that exhibit, and it opens today. And I'll be going to the opening reception next Saturday on October the 9th. This piece was awarded an Expression of Excellence Award. So I'm going to be receiving the award at
Congratulations.
the event. Thanks. I'm excited.
Yeah.
This is a big show. There are, I think, 91 pieces in the show up
Is
there.
it all textile art or is it just
No.
No.
As far as I know, there are only 4 or 5 textile pieces. The rest are all paintings and sculpture. No photography in that show.
Okay.
So this is a
Okay.
little different technique that I did. This is spun bonded polyester, which I have painted with acrylic paints using monoprinting and stamping and batiking to create the fabrics. And then I use my digital cutting machine to create the open work that you see there. And the open work grid is layered over the painted pieces, and then they're sewn together on a black felt background.
Uh-huh.
Stunning.
So another thing that comes up is you sell these, obviously.
Right?
Okay, the old-fashioned quilts, we'd buy a quilt and we'd put it on the bed
Right.
or throw it over a chair. Are these exhibited more like paintings on people's walls?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
They are hung from rods. I use D-rings at the top, and you hang them right on your wall. They're treated like a painting would be. Now, you don't wash these.
Okay. I was just trying to picture this on my bed, as a quilt.
No, not going to go on your bed.
Not going to go on your
Not
bed.
big enough for your bed, actually.
That's true.
This
Yeah.
one is about 50 inches tall by 41 wide.
Uh-huh.
So did you have this color scheme sort of already in mind, or did you, as you say, audition fabrics and colors?
Yeah, I did. I auditioned. What I did was I painted using a lot of different colors. And then I took it to my critique group and we talked about it and whether I should eliminate the cool colors and just go with the warms, which I ultimately wound up doing. They're very helpful in identifying possible alternatives. So that was the way that came about. So now I have a lot of cool colors that I'm going to make another one.
Another one, yeah.
with.
All
Yeah.
right, good.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's next?
Wow.
This is another abstract. This one is called Celebration.
Hmm.
And this is a hand-dyed fabric in the background. And what I've done is I've what's called reverse applique, which means I have created openings and then inserted behind the openings those pieces of colored silk in the solid colors.
Oh,
Oh, so that's an opening in the.
Yeah,
Ah,
I used a rotary cutter and just sliced through the solid background piece
huh.
and then pulled them slightly apart and then put the plain silk behind it.
Nice.
And then there's
wow.
lot on that piece over the top.
Oh, that's amazing. That's wow.
Is that the
Very
idea
nice.
behind Pandau? Is that
I'm
it?
not familiar with that,
And
so I
then
don't know.
I know a number of cultures use sort of the cut technique where
Cut
there's
work.
fabric underneath, and it
I
seems
know the
very
molas
intricate.
in the San Blas Islands, the molas do
Oh
that as
yes.
well.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
This is gorgeous.
Yeah. So, you said you cut the fabric. Oh, I'm sorry.
Right.
Let's
We
move
use
on.
a rotary blade.
Yeah, but then the rotary blade seems like it would give you very hard edges. And those.
Oh, you can wiggle.
Oh, is that what you're doing? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let's.
So this piece, that last piece, Celebration, lives in France now, and this piece is also a pictorial quilt from a trip that I took to France.
Hmm.
We visited a small village called Chateau Landon outside of Paris. I have a brother-in-law who lives there with his French wife, and they took us to this little village, and it was just an idyllic afternoon. And I took a photograph of this bridge, arched bridge, and the house behind it. And this is a new piece also. I just showed it for the first time at the Carnegie at their showcase this summer. And this one won an award of excellence at that show. So this one has some painted fabric. The bridge is painted white cotton. I have some paint that I've used in the water in the foreground. The sky is a painted sky. Some of the foliage is painted, and others of it is commercial fabrics that worked.
Hmm. Very
So,
beautiful.
how many? Uh, excuse my ignorance at some of this
No,
stuff, but
that's fine.
how many pieces of fabric, do you need to do something like this? I mean, are all these pieces of the tree individual pieces, or is it one piece that's painted?
No, they are separate pieces in the tree. There's separate bricks on the bridge, but not all of them are separate. There's a background, and then I've fused down rectangles to give it the look of a stone bridge.
Oh, that's what I was asking. So some of these bricks are actual individual pieces of fabric.
Right, right. The
Okay.
water lilies in the foreground are all individual pieces that are fused.
So how long does it take you to do something like this?
This is the one that I painted before I made the quilt.
Okay.
When COVID hit, I did a painting of this, and I liked it well enough that I decided to do it in a larger size in a quilt. And
Uh-huh.
because I had painted it, I'd worked out all of the problems
Oh, okay.
in that process. So it went really fast, and it only took me a couple of weeks to make this one. But that's unusual. When I did my commissions for the hospital over at Stanford, it was about 2.5 months to do that piece, and that's more
yeah.
typical.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. By the way, in our comments, Gail Wax wrote, "How many pieces? A lot."
Right. Gail knows.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so it's very, it looks like it's very intense work. I mean, very not only taking a long time, but I don't know what the right word would be.
It takes a lot of focus.
Mm.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah. But that's the enjoyable part. We call it getting into the zone. So,
When you saw this scene, did you already think, oh, that would make a great quilt? Or
oh,
did-
yeah.
Okay, good.
When I see it, I know it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I took a number of photographs, and there may be others coming out of that visit because it was a lovely place. So, but I think
Okay.
there might be a detail shot of this one too that you can see the stitch work.
So this plant on the, yeah, there you go.
There you go. You can see that that's all stitched. So what I
Yes.
did was I used a water soluble substrate that's kind of like saran wrap or cling wrap.
Uh-huh.
And you put it in an embroidery hoop under your sewing machine and you stitch furiously using several different green threads. And when you have it to your satisfaction, then you dip the whole thing into water and the substrate melts away, dissolves, and you're left with this clump of thread, which I then stitch down to create the foliage.
Yeah, amazing. That's fascinating. And in this close-up, I can see the bricks. So the
Right.
little individual bricks are the, as you
Here and
say, pressed down and then stitched on the edge.
Right.
Yeah. And the stitching, as you say, is mostly by machine, right?
Right.
And-
Yeah,
and-
I haven't been doing a lot of hand stitching, although many quilt artists now are doing a lot of hand stitching. Maybe in part because of COVID. You home so much you can sit and stitch. But I haven't done that.
What kind of machine do you use for the stitching?
I use my regular domestic sewing machine. I have a Janome sewing machine, and that's what I use for that. Some of the quilting in the foliage and in the water, I did on my mid-arm machine, which is a larger machine specifically designed to do quilting. Quilting is the stitching over the top that holds everything together.
So a mid-arm machine, tell me a little bit about that. What's that?
Well, I have my domestic machine, which has a relatively small opening, an opening about 11 inches. So you can't get a very big piece in there. So they make what are called mid-arm and long-arm machines. So a mid-arm machine, you sit at it from the end of the machine rather than looking at it straight on. And you use your hands to push the fabric under the needle. It doesn't move by itself. In a domestic sewing machine, there are feed dogs that pull the fabric through underneath the needle. But on a long arm or a mid arm, you're the one that's doing the moving. And you can do a much larger piece on a machine like that.
Wow. A lot of technical yeah.
Oh, it's quite a
excellences.
business. Let me tell you, it's a huge industry.
Yeah. Okay. So what do we have up next? There we go. Oh.
So this is called Day Hike 2. And this also was from a photograph I took. That's my husband. We were on a hike and it was in the fall. It was crispy, cool. And so I decided to make that as a quilt. And it's done a little differently than any of the others you've seen. This is what is called a confetti technique. And with this technique, you select your fabrics that you want to use, and then you take that rotary cutting blade. It rolls just like a pizza cutter, and you cut up the fabric into little tiny bits, probably a third of an inch in each direction, so very small. It's sort of a pointillist technique, if you're familiar with that from Impressionist painting. And then you sprinkle the colors where you want them to create the image that you're trying to achieve. And then the figure and the fencing, the railing, is not that technique. That's just using regular yardage to cut out the shapes that you need. And then over the top of it, because you've got all these little bitty pieces that would fly everywhere, you cover the whole thing with tulle, which is netting, basically a fine netting like you would use on a bridal veil. Only in this case, I used black, I believe it was black tulle. And that goes over the top. And then you do all your stitching over the top of that. Very intense stitching to hold down all of those little pieces so they don't fly around underneath there when you turn it up.
Oh,
my gosh, what a
that was my question. It's like you don't stitch every one of these little ones, do you?
No, but you pretty much, you're close to it.
Yeah.
The stitching is very close together, but it's just done at random, almost like a puzzle, the shape of puzzle pieces all over it, but very closely.
It's impressive. And the background, so is that also fabric? I mean,
That's
it's like a
all.
picture in, yeah.
The background is all of those little tiny pieces sprinkled on a.
No, I meant
substrate.
behind, it's almost like this is a picture
Oh,
mounted.
yeah, the edges, you mean, the borders?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is one fabric, one
Okay.
wonderful batik fabric.
Wow.
I try to buy very organic looking fabrics for the kind of work that I do. I don't use little prints or plaids or things like that. I want real organic looking.
So where do you get your materials? You all over, or do you go to a
pretty
fabric
much.
store like here in town? Or
Joanne, yes, I go
Yeah.
there. I don't find a lot there really, but the big shows that I attend all have vendors that sell wonderful fabric from all over the world. So you might get African fabrics. I've used a lot of African fabrics. Bali makes batiks in Indonesia. And so those are wonderful for the kind of work that I do. So I'm always on the lookout. And then at times I make my own by painting or dyeing.
So you mentioned that you have a lot of fabric.
Oh, yes.
Do you have a storage locker that you keep them in? I mean, how large is your collection?
Oh, well, I've got 2 dressers that have 5 drawers, and they're all jammed full. I have another one over behind me that is 4 drawers, and it's jammed full, and I mean jammed full. And then I have some pull-out drawers with fabric, so there's a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. You can't have too much.
No, I imagine that's true. Okay.
So this is called Forest Floor, and this is painted work. There's some painted silk, but most of it is painted spun bonded polyester, which if you're familiar with interfacing, Pellon interfacing, it's a kind of interfacing that's sturdier than most interfacing that you use in clothing, although you can use it in clothing. It doesn't tear, it doesn't shred, it doesn't fray, and it takes paint really well. So these leaves were all cut out and painted, and they have the adhesive on the back. They've been fused down and then stitched over with the quilting.
Very nice. Very, very nice. Yeah. So next, let's see what we have. Oh,
this is a detail shot of another one that you'll be seeing. This is called Farewell Friday Harbor. And my husband and I went up to the San Juan Islands and took a Rhodes Scholar week, if you're familiar with Rhodes Scholar seminars. And we were leaving, was the last day on the ferry, pulling away from Friday Harbor. And I took a picture. It was early in the morning, about 8 in the morning. And I took a picture. I loved the way the sun was hitting the little village. So this is a close-up of part of the larger quilt.
So
and there's the full scene.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see.
Pulling away from Friday Harbor.
Wow.
How did you do the reflections in the water?
The water is one hand-dyed fabric, And then with my sewing machine, I stitched in thread to create the illusion of the reflections that I could see.
So the reflection is stitched
Yes,
and it's with just thread, right?
it's all thread work. Yeah, just thread.
Okay, the next question that just pops up for me is the different styles. I'm amazed and impressed. And you go from very, free-flowing abstract to very, I don't know, what style would you call this? Linda,
Well,
you
I
know
did
more
a
about.
series of architectural quilts, and
Okay.
you'll see several of them today, but this is one of those. I had a show over at the San Jose Quilt Museum, International Quilt Museum,
Mhm.
and with two other artists. And we were there in the Porcella Gallery of that museum. And each of us, the theme was angles, spaces, and lines, or angles, shapes, and lines, rather.
Uh-huh.
So we did different interpretations of architectural themes. So this piece and several others were part of that.
Sure.
Oh, great.
Where do you get your ideas for these? I
I
mean,
don't
they're.
know. That's mystery.
Oh, okay.
It's very mysterious.
Yeah.
Often from photographs, actually from our travels. That's a really
Okay.
important source for me.
Uh-huh. But they really do seem to reflect different artistic styles. They're in there somewhere, you know. Like
Some people consider that a disadvantage, but that's how it is. I don't know.
yeah, that's how it is.
It's
Okay,
what my muse says to do.
of course. Okay, so what do we have next here?
And this
Ooh,
is called
Wow.
Mile 116 Grand Canyon. This is from a photograph of a offshoot canyon on the Colorado River called Elves Chasm.
Hmm.
And it's a waterfall that comes down this rock face, these wonderful stones. And when I finished it, you didn't have any sense of the scale of it until I decided to insert my grandson in there. And suddenly you could tell that these are very big rocks. It's a very
Mhm.
big canyon. And he likes that. So his family owns this
so
quilt.
it's okay. Yeah. So how do you do the figures? Is this from a photograph that
I
you?
think that one was just photocopied by my
Uh-huh.
home printer onto fabric.
Okay.
So I do it in various ways. The one of my husband on the hike was
Uh-huh.
I just created a pattern and cut out bits of fabric to create the illusion of a figure.
Uh-huh.
So
So
whatever works.
getting in up close to these rocks, again, are those painted or are those different pieces of fabric to create the
Different
different?
pieces of fabric, and then I have also painted to create the illusion of contour. So it's a bit of both.
Okay.
And then
So,
the water effect is using ribbons and a little bit of thin braid and thread.
Oh,
it's wonderful.
yeah, it really is.
Yeah. You're taking us into a whole different world. It's
Oh, good.
fascinating.
It is, and it sounds like fun, intense fun.
Yeah, it is. It's great fun.
Okay. Are there more? Yeah. Oh,
Oh
So
gosh.
this is also the San Juan Islands. This is called Morning Calm. And this was a snapshot we took on one of our field trips with Rhodes Scholars. And it was just a gorgeous sky reflected in the water that appealed to me in this piece. So this is fused work again, fused applique. I've made a pattern from my photograph enlarged and then fused them down.
uh-huh.
I've used some paints on this one. There's a bit of satin fabric in that brightest cloud. So it's a bit of a mix.
Okay. So how did you get the what would I say, dappled effect in the clouds? Is that painted or
In
different
part, it's the
fabrics or?
fabric that I chose.
Oh, okay.
And then I had to fussy cut it to kind of create the illusion that there was a mirroring going on from sky to water. But it's basically a wonderful fabric that worked.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, cute.
And this was a commissioned piece also. This was commissioned by Valley Children's Hospital for their new specialty care center down in Bakersfield. There's one here in Modesto that a number of artists have work in. My pieces were commissioned for the Bakersfield unit. So this is called Rascal Raccoons. And this was just an original design I did. They wanted something that would appeal to children, but not be juvenile looking. And so this is what I came up with. So the faces of these little raccoons are intensely painted. It's called thread painting. It's intense thread work, very close together to create the illusion of the fur of a raccoon.
Yeah.
Oh my.
And there may be a close-up of that too. I'm not sure if I submitted one of those or not.
Oh.
Yeah, there he is.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
The eyes are painted. I painted the eyes separately and then put them behind the eye hole openings to get the illusion of an eye.
That's amazing. In our comment section, Robin Huff wrote, "Beautiful work, Sue."
Thank you.
Do you know that person? No.
I'm not sure that I do.
Okay.
And this is another travel piece. This is from Roussillon in France, which is in the south of France. And it's a small hill village there where ochre, red and yellow ochre, were mined for many years before artificial ochre was created. So this is what the source of pigments were for fine artists back in Van Gogh's time. So the whole village is painted with paints made from ochre, and they're all yellow and red. Very arresting, lovely place.
Beautiful.
So
Beautiful
this was
colors. Yeah.
This was one of the architectural series that was over in San Jose.
Okay. So is this is there a lot of painting going on in this or
There is
dyeing or something?
These are a lot of hand-dyed fabrics are
Okay.
used. And then I have done some painting to create the shadows
Or the hand dye,
that
yeah.
you see.
Yeah, because when you again thinking about fabric, I haven't seen a lot of fabric that has these colors in them.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. And that's when the dyeing and the painting really comes in
They come
handy.
in
The
handy.
sky is also painted. I
Yeah.
like to use my painted fabric for sky.
Uh-huh.
I would love
Wonderful.
to see all these in person. I hope that you will have a solo show coming up soon within driving distance. Or
Well, there's a wonderful art quilt show coming to the Muse Art Gallery in April, for the month of April. It's called Art Quilts 2. It has just finished up a 3-month run down in Santa Monica at the California Heritage Museum. And there are, I don't know, 60 or 65 wonderful pieces that will be coming to the Michelin for the month of April. So you're going to get a chance to see art quilts up close that are very fine. You'll enjoy it a lot.
Wonderful. So are there more, or we're getting close to the end?
No, I think there's more.
There's more.
We
Okay.
have time.
A few minutes, sure.
This one is called Sanctuary, and this is again part of the architectural group of quilts that I did. And this is also from a photograph that I took in France on that same trip. And this is called the Sentinel, and this is a view of an old building in Portland, Oregon on the waterfront. And it's a building of 100 years or more ago. And I, again, took an early morning photograph of the building and then recreated it for my architectural.
Right.
I love this perspective.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah, and
detail.
I always enjoy seeing these in person, in a in an image like this, from the way back, it looks like, oh, that's kind of like a photograph or something. But when you get up close and you actually see the stitching and the incredible amount of work that goes into creating some of these effects, it's impressive. You know, I stand in awe.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
And this is a detail from a piece called Spring Debut. I also have the full scene here as well. Again, this is the tiny bits of fabric that I have cut out with my rotary cutter. And then they have adhesive on the backside and they're ironed down and then stitched over. This is a scene from a beautiful little glade in the Portland Japanese garden that I photographed one day.
Oh, that was breathtaking.
And this one is Tree House for Robins, it's called. The inspiration was that wonderful sky forest piece in the background. That's an African fabric.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
In African countries make beautiful textiles, but they tend to be much more defined images. They do it in batik, but this, I think, was probably the end of the day. They just threw out everything that they had left over. And so I got a very organic looking tree canopy from that fabric.
Fascinating.
And
Yes.
that's the close up of the robins. Used to print fabric under the birds' chins.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I love skunks. That's so cute.
And this one lives over at the Lucille Packard Children's Hospital also. This is called Palo Alto Polecat Parade.
So great.
That's great. Yeah.
They wanted animals that you might see in the Palo Alto area. So that's why herons and skunks.
Wonderful.
That's sweet.
And this is the full
That's the full
view
one.
of Spring Debut that you saw the detail of earlier.
That's exquisite.
It sure is.
It's a lovely, lovely spot.
It seems to move. I mean, I can just sort of sense the wind blowing through the leaves and petals. Just gorgeous. Oh.
And this is one that will be coming to the Mislin in April. This is called Sunset Moth of Madagascar. And this was inspired by a photograph in National Geographic magazine of a microscopic photograph of the wing of a sunset moth. The actual moth is up at the upper left-hand corner. And then I have recreated my version of the scales that are viewed in a microscopic photograph of the wings way close up.
My goodness.
So this is all iridescent paint on spun bonded polyester, and then the petals are individually cut out and stitched down.
Oh, there it is. Wonderful.
That's lovely.
And this is called Suspended. This is an imaginary canyon in the Southwest somewhere.
That is so beautiful. I'm awestruck. I just love these.
Thank you. That's what these interviews are for, aren't they?
Yes, that's exactly what they are.
And this is called Yosemite Village View from Taft Point. I was on a hike in Yosemite. We hiked out to Taft Point, which is, if you've ever been there, is terrifying.
It is. It is absolutely terrifying.
And on the way out to the little platform, which is the destination, you pass by these crevices and you can look down into the valley. So that's Yosemite Village down below me. There's Camp Curry at the lower front. And then the Ahwahnee Hotel is back in the middle. and the Merced River running through. I was just fascinated by that view, and so I wanted to recreate it in fabric.
Sue, we have a question in our comments from Gail Wax. She asks, who sells spun bonded polyester?
You can buy it at Joann Fabric Store. It's Pellon 830. I also order online a product called Evalon through a company called Talus Online. And I buy big sheets of it. They're 22 by 30 inches in size, and I use a lot of that also.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Wow.
Oh, I wish we weren't done. I could just look at these all day.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I mean,
Mhm.
I have followed some of your work that I've seen at Miss Lind over the years. I've been impressed, and I'm happy to finally be able to talk with you about it. I mean, it's more impressive actually talking to you, as impressive as it is just looking at this stuff. It's a true different art form that people don't think about. You're a magnificent artist
Oh, well, thank
Absolutely.
you very much.
with all these. It's in there somewhere, you know. It doesn't look like the work of an attorney or a judge.
I used to cover the walls of my chambers in the courthouse with my quilts.
Oh, you
Mm.
did?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So you did try to integrate a little bit.
Yeah, that was my
Yeah.
own private gallery. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So what did your visitors have to say when they would walk in and see that?
They were appreciative.
Mm.
You know,
They
most
were?
of the judges at that time were men, and they had stuffed ducks that they shot in the valley or sports stuff. But I had my art quilts. So.
Mm.
Yeah,
Nice.
wonderful. Well, we've truly enjoyed having you here.
Yes.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure.
It's been
Appreciate it
very,
very much.
very educational, artistically. So once again, thank you for coming. And to everyone watching, we'll see you next week. So
Thank you so much, Sue. It was
Thank
fascinating.
you.
Yeah.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.